When I started with YG, the first thing I did was I listened to every single speaker I could find.
Yeah.
So between me, my friends, every shop I could reach out to, I listened to and I measured many speakers.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to try to work out for me, when an audio system works, the good thing is it's obvious. When it works, you get this, the walls fall away, and you know the feeling. It's so magical.
Yeah.
And I was trying to work out what makes that magic. So I would listen and I would measure. And this helped me slowly begin to understand, oh, okay, this is what's important. Then we started doing simulations and these multi-domain simulations. So we simulate, it's not a crazy thing. We build our speakers the same way that, Tesla builds a car. So we built the Peaks. And the Peaks was a great way of getting this sense of there's a handful of key things which make this magic. And we learned so much building the Peaks that we wanted to reflect that into reference 3. Because we had this strange period where when Peaks came out, before reference 3, in many ways, Peaks was better than our reference 2 range.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we had this challenge where you're sitting, especially when customers would ask, what are the advantages? And you'd have to say, well, actually right now, some of the Peaks have characteristics and behavioral capabilities which are ahead even of our reference 2. It's one of these things we didn't expect. When the team was designing Peaks, we didn't expect it would be so good. So that's why we were in such a hurry. Commercially, the better idea would have been to release reference 3 one model at a time. But
step by step.
Instead, we worked very hard that year so that we could actually release every model as reference 3 with all the new technologies, everything we'd learned.
So that happened with your first product as a CEO of YG at the time, right?
Yes.
With Peak series that you had that, so that's how series 3 was built.
And we learned so much more making series 3, reference 3. And also with reference 3, because they're much more expensive speakers, we have so much more capability to use. We use custom capacitors, which are very particular characteristics, incredibly expensive, that we can't afford to put into Peaks, but we can use in reference. So we push those same principles. The drivers, let's say in the Haley 3, the tweeter and the mid-range driver are phase coherent to within 1 or 2 degrees over 6 octaves, which is crazy. So if you watch on a high-speed camera and you start at, let's say, 5 kilohertz, the tweeter is moving and the mid-range driver is static. As you decrease the frequencies, you start to see both of them moving together until at the crossover point they're sharing the energy pretty much exactly, and then slowly it's just the mid-range. Across that whole range, the 2 drive units are moving perfectly together. And for the human ear, that makes magic. Because the human ear is not very good at vertical discrimination. For the ear, it just sounds like a point source. And because it sounds like a point source, it interacts with the room like a point source. All of these strange reflections and phase issues fall away. It starts sounding like you have musicians in the room. And that's what we first learned with Peaks. There are 10 or 12 incredible things that we've learned that I didn't expect when we started, but this is probably the most important. And
so phase matters.
Phase is hugely important. If you go to a concert and you sit, let's say a classical concert, and you sit right next to the orchestral pit, and you go up to the top balcony, there can be 20 dB balance difference. And your ear doesn't care. Your ear immediately goes, okay, I've got this, this is live, I believe you. If you take the sound there and you introduce even a small area of sharp phase slope, your ear is like, no, it's a recording. I don't believe this anymore. So it's so strange. Human ears have this incredible sensitivity to phase coherence.
Going back to that simulation, simulating unit or crossover is one thing, but and even structure, that's one thing. But speakers as a whole, how do you simulate it? I mean, there are so many parameters and variables that's involved.
The really strange thing is actually, you look around the world today, every car, every airplane, SpaceX's rockets, every mobile phone is designed through simulation. They simulate every part of it simultaneously, because that's the only way you can work out how things work. All we're doing is taking the same approach as to loudspeakers. So we use a finite element model for all of the solid parts and for the rubber and everything which is flexing. We model all of the components in the crossover as physics models. So we don't simulate it as a circuit. We actually simulate, for example, each capacitor is simulated as a roll of material with a dielectric. We simulate the current flows through the circuit board. Because the strange thing is, the human ear is so sensitive. Even distortion at the minus 80 dB level, even minus 100 dB level, if it's the right order of distortion, is immediately something that your ear can pick up. And so we have to simulate this as a physics model, because the craziest things, the tracks on the circuit board, because we have inductors in crossover circuits, an inductor works by generating a magnetic field. A magnetic field induces a current, and by having one of the tracks on the circuit board at this angle or this angle, it's audible. And so we simulate the whole thing. And even more, we've built now very detailed models based on measurement of now it's about 250 different amplifiers. So we simulate the amplifier driving the speaker.
How do you simulate those amplifiers? I mean, 200 different amplifiers, what kind of characteristics do you?
It's not like a report that you see in a magazine. What we actually do is we put a series of signals through the amplifier. So single tones, bitones, tritones, and also a series of real high-resolution tracks. And then we measure the output of the amplifier into a series of different loads. So into both different impedances and different capacitance and inductance on top of that. So we do this overall grid. We have about 200 different load cases, and then we have about 400 different signal patterns. So what we do is we take the amplifier, we plug it into a signal analyzer, and we put the inputs into the amplifier, and then it just runs for, it's about 4 hours, and it just does all of these test cases. And that builds a very detailed model of exactly how that amplifier behaves in terms of distortion, impulse response, phase response, into a huge variety of different loads. And that model is then used in our multi-domain model of our speakers.
That's like more than 800 hours of work right there, my goodness.
But the simulations themselves, it's like everything else these days. 20 years ago, what we do to build our speakers would be impossible. These days, I can take these simulations. The infrastructure behind Amazon is this thing, EC2, Elastic Cloud. It means that in 10 seconds, I can have 1,000 servers, 1,000 very powerful GPU servers, which each one of them would have been the most powerful computer in the world 25 years ago. I can have 1,000 of them just like that, and I pay for them by the minute. So I can run these simulations, which are incredibly detailed. We use time slices, which are shorter than 100,000th of a second, sometimes a 500,000th of a second, to look at how capacitors behave inside our circuits. It's unimaginable 20 years ago. Today, it's easy. It's very good fun.
I understand.